السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم ثم أما بعد. Brothers and sisters in Islam, today we continue the story of the companion that we began last time. And that story, of course, was of Saeed Ibn Aamir Al-Jumahi, radiallahu anhu. One of those companions of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, whose name isn't very well known, isn't the most famous, but who has a story that we should learn from nonetheless. So, last time we concluded with Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu, when he was the Khalifa, appointing Sa'id radiallahu anhu to the position of governor of Homs in modern day Syria. And Sa'id radiallahu anhu had initially resisted this appointment. But Umar radiallahu anhu insisted, and in the end, Sa'id relented. Sa'id radiallahu anhu relented, and he took on the governorship. And so he set off to Homs with his wife, and they had just married, and they settled there and began their lives anew there. Now a time passed, and Umar ibn Khattab radiallahu anhu eventually greeted a delegation that came to Medina from Homs. And while they were there, Umar asked them to put together a list of the poor in their city so that he could distribute some money to them. And so the delegation put the list together. And Umar, when he was scanning the list, he came across a name that startled him. Right there on the list was the name, right there on the list of the poorest people in the city of Homs. On that list was the name of Saeed Ibn Aamir Al-Jumahi. And Umar, he was confused. He thought to himself, surely this isn't the Saeed Ibn Aamir Al-Jumahi. Surely this isn't Saeed, the governor of the city. And so he asked the delegation, he said, who is this Saeed Ibn Aamir? And the delegation told him, he is the Emir. And they said, just so matter of fact, he is the Emir. He's the governor. And Umar, he was like, his reaction, he was like, your Emir is poor? And the delegation said, yes. Sometimes days go by without a fire being lit in his home. And when Umar heard this, he was very deeply moved, and he began to weep. And he immediately ordered for 1,000 dinars to be gathered and given to the delegation to be given to Sa'id radiallahu anhu. So they did. They gathered 1,000 dinars, they put it in a package, and he sent it with the delegation back to Sa'id radiallahu anhu. Now when Sa'id received this bag of money, he immediately reacted with intense disgust, and he pushed the bag away as though he'd been given some sort of poison. He pushed it away, and he withdrew from it. He shrank away from it. He was repulsed by it. And he said, La hawla wa la quwwata. He said, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un. To Allah we belong, and to Him we return. And he said this in such a way that implied misfortune. The way he said it implied that he was reacting to some tragedy that had befallen him. And so his wife, she heard this response, and she asked him, and she became very worried immediately, because again, the way he said it, it sounded like some disaster had struck. And so she asked him with great urgency and great concern. She's like, what happened? Has the Khalifa died? And Sa'id radiallahu anhu, and so she immediately jumped to the worst case scenario. Has the Khalifa died? And Sa'id radiallahu anhu, what's his response? He's like, no. Worse than that. Something worse than that has happened. And his wife couldn't believe it. And she said, are the Muslims battling? Is there some major battle that the Muslims have got involved in? And Sa'id radiallahu anhu said, no. Something worse than that. And Now his wife didn't know what could he possibly be talking about. And Sa'id Jalan, he said, something has come upon this household to corrupt, to corrupt my hereafter and cause disorder in my house. And so his wife, and again, she doesn't know what he's talking about still. She told him, then get rid of it. And she doesn't realize that he's talking about money. She said, get rid of it. And so Sa'id Radwan took the 1,000 dinars that Umar Radwan had given him to help with his poverty. He took that money and he redistributed it. He redistributed the money amongst the poor in his city. And so, of course, Sa'id Radwan remained on that list of the poorest people in the city that he was governing. A completely incredible situation. You'd never see this today. That the governor should be amongst the poorest in his own city. And this was the position that Sa'id Radwan willingly put himself in. Right? He had the money. Umar Radwan gave him the money that would help him, and he gave it away, 1,000 dinars. And shortly thereafter, Umar Radwan came to Homs himself to visit, check in, see how things were going. Now, Homs was known for having a population of people that were easily displeased by their rulers. They often complained about their rulers. And so when he came and he asked around about the emir, he wanted to hear the people's opinion of their emir, sort of taking a survey. Because again, Umar Dalan, he took the position of governor very seriously, and he selected his governors with great care. And he wanted to make sure they were doing a good job, that they were living up to their responsibilities. So he asked the people how the governor was doing, how the emir was doing. And they told him, we have 4 complaints about him. We have 4 complaints about him. The first is that he doesn't come out of his house until late in the day. So it's usually the sun is pretty high up before he bothers coming out of his house to deal with the affairs of the city. The second is that he doesn't see anyone at night. So he comes out late in the day, he comes out pretty late in the morning, and then at night he refuses any visitors. He doesn't see anyone or talk to anyone at night. Thirdly, they said, this was the third complaint now, there's a day or two in the month, every month, where he doesn't come out of the house at all. Not during the day and not during the night. Not during the day and not during the night. And finally, he sometimes blacks out randomly. He'll randomly faint during meetings. And he can't seem to help it, but we find this very frustrating and annoying. So these are the 4 complaints that they had about Saeed radiallahu anh. That he comes out late in the day, that he doesn't come out at all at night, that there is a day or two every month where he doesn't see anyone at all, and finally that he blacks out randomly during meetings. And so Umar radiallahu anh, he was silent while he listened to this, and then he said, let me summon him, and I'll bring him together with you to address their complaints. And Umar said, and I pray to God that my impression of him isn't damaged, that my opinion of him isn't damaged, because I used to have great confidence in him. So Umar Dalan, he called Saeed Radiallahu to come out. He asked him to come out so that they can discuss these 4 complaints that people had about him. And inshallah, next time, those are the complaints. We'll discuss those complaints. We'll see whether or not Saeed Radiallahu anh, whether or not he had a good reason for these 4 complaints about his rule that the people of Homs had. So that'll be a topic of discussion next time, inshallah. Jazakumullah khairan. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.